From a man who got locked up for keeping sphinxes in his back garden, to Death Eaters who tortured 2 people into permanent insanity, to the one prisoner who somehow escaped using nothing but the power of being very, very thin. This is Every Prisoner of Azkaban and Harry Potter Explained. Tier 1. The minor offenders. Crimes that technically warranted a prison sentence, apparently. Crispin Cronk. Let's start small. Crispin Cronk was sent to Azkaban for keeping sphinxes in his back garden. Not one sphinx. Sphinxes. Plural. The Ministry had apparently warned him multiple times. He kept ignoring them. Now, I'm not saying I agree with the Ministry on everything, but if someone has to warn you more than once about the sphinxes, that's on you, Crispin. He got a sentence. The sphinxes, presumably, remained. Tarquin McTavish. Imprisoned for trapping his Muggle neighbor inside a kettle. Just a regular Tuesday in Wizarding Britain. We don't know how long the neighbor was in there. We don't know why a kettle specifically. We don't know if they were made small first or the kettle was made large. These are the unanswered questions that keep me up at night. McTavish went to Azkaban. The kettle situation remains unexplained. Mundungus Fletcher. Mundungus Fletcher was a petty thief, Order of the Phoenix affiliate, and genuinely one of the least reliable people in the entire wizarding world. Managed to get himself sent to Azkaban in 1997 for impersonating an Inferius during a burglary. An Inferius. A reanimated corpse. He dressed up as a reanimated corpse to rob someone, got caught, and ended up in Azkaban. To be fair to Mundungus, that is a commitment to the bit. It just wasn't a very good bit. He'd previously escaped Azkaban sentences by bribing, informing, and generally being slippery. This time, he ran out of excuses. Sturgis Podmore. Sturgis Podmore was a member of the Order of the Phoenix. Technically one of the good guys, who got caught trying to break into a restricted area at the Ministry of Magic in late 1995. He was sentenced to 6 months. What was he trying to get into? The corridor housing the prophecy about Harry and Voldemort. Was he trying to steal it for Voldemort? Almost certainly, under the Imperius Curse. But the Ministry didn't care much for nuance. 6 months in Azkaban. He served his time. The Order quietly moved on. Xenophilius Lovegood. Xenophilius Lovegood, Luna's dad, editor of The Quibbler, full-time eccentric, ended up in Azkaban essentially for being too loud about supporting Harry Potter. Under Voldemort's ministry, he'd been printing issues of The Quibbler that openly backed Harry. The Death Eaters arrested Luna as leverage. Then, in a moment of absolutely tragic desperation, Xenophilius summoned ministry officials to his own house to try to hand Harry over, hoping to get Luna back. It nearly worked. It didn't. He went to Azkaban. Luna survived, and when it was all over, he was released. And somehow his faith in Nargles remained completely intact. Tier 2. The wrongly imprisoned. Sent to Azkaban without committing the crime they were accused of. The Ministry's track record here is not great. Rubeus Hagrid. In 1993, when students at Hogwarts started getting petrified and a message about the Chamber of Secrets appeared on a wall, the Ministry needed someone to blame. They picked Hagrid. Cornelius Fudge himself showed up at Hagrid's hut and sent him to Azkaban without a trial. Just to be seen to be doing something, as Fudge put it, which is genuinely one of the more depressing lines in the series. Hagrid had nothing to do with it. He'd been wrongly blamed for opening the chamber 50 years earlier, too, a crime committed by a teenage Tom Riddle who had somehow managed to frame a giant man with a kind face and a pet spider. Hagrid was released when the real culprit was uncovered. He cried. Everyone cried. Moving on. Marvolo Gaunt. Marvolo Gaunt was Voldemort's maternal grandfather, a pureblood fanatic, deeply unpleasant, and enormously proud of his descent from Salazar Slytherin, despite the fact that his family had been in poverty for generations. He was sent to Azkaban for attacking Ministry officials who came to arrest his son, Morfin. 6 months. He came out already weakened and probably died shortly after. He never knew his daughter Merope had fallen in love with a muggle named Tom Riddle. He also never knew that his grandson was going to become the most feared dark wizard in a century. Ignorance, in this particular case, was a mercy. Morfin Gaunt, Marvolo's son and Voldemort's uncle, first went to Azkaban for hexing a muggle and resisting arrest. Standard Gaunt behavior, but it's his second sentence that matters. After he returned, a teenage Tom Riddle visited him, retrieved the Gaunt family ring, and then went to the Riddle house and murdered his own muggle father and grandparents. Then he came back, modified Morfin's memory to make him believe he'd done it, and left. Morfin confessed. He went back to Azkaban for 3 murders he didn't commit. He died there, genuinely believing he'd killed them. Dumbledore later extracted the true memory, but by then, Morfin was already gone. Voldemort framed his own uncle and just went back to school. He was 16. And then there's Sirius Black, the most famous prisoner in Azkaban's history, sent there in 1981 for allegedly betraying James and Lily Potter to Voldemort and then blowing up Peter Pettigrew along with a street full of muggles. 12 years. No trial, no appeal, just straight to the cell, guarded by Dementors. The only thing keeping him sane being that he knew, as a dog, the Dementors couldn't affect him the same way, reliving the moment he realized the person he trusted had betrayed everyone he loved. He escaped in 1993, becoming the first person in history to break out of Azkaban. Method? Being very thin and slipping through the bars as a dog. The Ministry did not find this funny. Sirius, to his credit, looked like he had in fact found very little of it funny either. Tier 3. The Death Eaters. Captured after the First Wizarding War. The ones who got caught when Voldemort fell. Some lied their way out. These ones didn't, or were too proud to bother. Igor Karkaroff, later headmaster of Durmstrang, earlier committed Death Eater, was captured by Mad-Eye Moody after 6 months of pursuit and sent to Azkaban. He got out by doing something the others refused to do. He talked. He gave the Ministry names. Genuine names of real Death Eaters, not just dead ones. He named Augustus Rookwood, among others. The Ministry, delighted to have actual intelligence for once, released him. Karkaroff spent the next decade and a half pretending he'd never been involved, right up until Voldemort returned in 1995, and his dark mark started burning again. He ran. The Death Eaters found him eventually. Loyalty, as it turns out, only gets you so far when you've already given everyone up. Antonin Dolohov. Antonin Dolohov was one of the most dangerous Death Eaters of the First Wizarding War, personally responsible for the murders of Gideon and Fabian Pruitt, Molly Weasley's brothers, among countless Muggles and non-supporters of the Dark Lord. He was captured around 1981 and sentenced to Azkaban. He escaped in the 1996 mass breakout, immediately participated in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, got recaptured, went back to Azkaban, and then escaped again in the 1997 breakout. The man treated Azkaban like a revolving door. He also hit Hermione with a curse in the Department of Mysteries. A curse so severe that, even muffled, without an incantation, it nearly killed her. He was not someone the Ministry should have kept letting escape. And yet... Augustus Rookwood. Augustus Rookwood worked in the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry of Magic. He was also a spy for Voldemort, feeding classified information to the Death Eaters for years before anyone noticed. It was Karkaroff who gave him up. Rookwood was sentenced to Azkaban, escaped in the 1996 mass breakout, fought in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, got recaptured, then escaped again in 1997. He also fought in the Battle of Hogwarts, where he was eventually taken down by Aberforth Dumbledore, a Ministry insider turned spy, Azkaban escapee twice over, and present at the final battle. Rookwood had a very full career. Mulciber. Mulciber was a Death Eater who specialized in the Imperius Curse, specifically using it on other people. He was one of the ones named at the post-war trials and sent to Azkaban. He escaped in the 1996 mass breakout, fought in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, was recaptured, went back to Azkaban, and escaped again in 1997. Like Dolohov and Rookwood, Mulciber is essentially a testament to Azkaban's retention problem. He didn't get a heroic last stand or a dramatic death scene. He's just one of those Death Eaters whose name you recognize because Dumbledore said it once in a pensieve memory, which is somehow more chilling. Travers. Travers was another Death Eater imprisoned after the First Wizarding War. Convicted, sentenced, and eventually released via the 1997 breakout. By that point, he was operating openly under Voldemort's controlled ministry, even crossing paths with Harry, Ron, and Hermione in Diagon Alley during their Horcrux hunt. He very nearly blew Harry's cover. He's the kind of Death Eater who makes you realize just how many of them were walking around freely by that point, which is either impressive world-building or deeply alarming, depending on how you look at it. Bellatrix Lestrange. Bellatrix Black, prisoner 93, the crown jewel of Azkaban's guest list. In 1981, Bellatrix, her husband Rodolphus, his brother Rabastin, and Barty Crouch Jr. captured Aurors Frank and Alice Longbottom, Neville's parents, and tortured them with the Cruciatus Curse until they lost their minds permanently. Not quickly. Sustained. Deliberate. The goal was information about Voldemort's whereabouts. Frank and Alice Longbottom spent the rest of their lives in St. Mungo's, unable to recognize their own son. At her trial, Bellatrix didn't beg for mercy. She sat in her chains like they were a throne and told the court she was proud, that Voldemort would rise again, that she would wait for him. Sentenced to life imprisonment. Marked as prisoner 93. Spent 14 years in Azkaban, while most Death Eaters were out there claiming they'd been Imperiist. She escaped in the 1996 mass breakout, immediately went back to work murdering and torturing, killing her cousin Sirius of the Department of Mysteries, and was eventually killed by Molly Weasley at the Battle of Hogwarts, who, it should be noted, had lost a son 12 hours earlier and still managed to outfight the most dangerous witch of her generation, Bellatrix Lestrange, committed to the last and deeply, profoundly unwell. Rodolphus Lestrange, Bellatrix's husband, Rabastin's brother, was convicted alongside her for the Longbottom torture and sentenced to life in Azkaban. Unlike Bellatrix, Rodolphus doesn't get many lines. He's there, he escapes, he fights, he presumably gets recaptured somewhere in the chaos of the Second Wizarding War. After Voldemort's defeat, he apparently survived, eventually finding Delphine, Voldemort's daughter, and telling her the truth of her heritage. Not exactly a redemption arc, but points for still being alive. Rabastin Lestrange. Same crime, same sentence, same trajectory. He was present at the Longbottom torture, sentenced to life, escaped in 1996, fought at the Department of Mysteries, got recaptured, and then escaped again in 1997. Of the 4 people involved in torturing the Longbottoms, he's the one who gets mentioned least, which, for someone convicted of one of the most heinous crimes in the series, is either a writing choice or a quiet commentary on how many horrors Voldemort's inner circle contained. And here's the fascinating one. Barty Crouch Jr., son of Bartimus Crouch Sr., head of magical law enforcement, one of the most severe and respected figures in the ministry, was convicted alongside the Lestranges for the Longbottom torture. His own father sentenced him. Life imprisonment. About a year in, his mother, dying, begged Crouch Sr. to let her take Barty's place. They smuggled in Polyjuice Potion. Barty Jr. walked out looking like his mother. His mother died in his place in Azkaban. His father kept him imprisoned under the Imperius Curse in their own home for years. Then, Voldemort found him, freed him, and he spent an entire school year disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, the Auror who'd helped capture him, manipulating events to ensure Harry's entry into the Triwizard Tournament and eventual transportation to Voldemort. He succeeded. He was exposed, kissed by a Dementor, and destroyed. Barty Crouch Jr. is proof that the most dangerous people aren't always the loudest ones in the room. Tier 4. Captured after the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. A group of Death Eaters who walked into the Ministry of Magic to steal a prophecy and mostly left in handcuffs. Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy had spent 20 years after Voldemort's fall telling everyone he'd been under the Imperius Curse. Nobody fully believed him, but nobody could prove otherwise. So he got to keep his mansion, his ministry influence, and his extremely expensive wardrobe. Then, in 1996, he led a group of Death Eaters into the Department of Mysteries to steal the prophecy from Harry, got outwitted by a group of 16-year-olds and the Order of the Phoenix, and was arrested. Azkaban. His wand was later confiscated by Voldemort himself as punishment for the failure. Lucius Malfoy went from the most influential Death Eater in Wizarding society to a man stripped of everything by his own master. He survived the war only because his wife lied to Voldemort's face in the Forbidden Forest. The Malfoys, in the end, were saved by family, not loyalty to the Dark Lord. Walden McNair, Ministry Executioner, Death Eater, the man who came to Hogwarts in 1994 to behead Buckbeak, was captured at the Battle of the Department of Mysteries and sent to Azkaban. He escaped in the 1997 breakout and fought in the Battle of Hogwarts. In one of the more satisfying moments of the series, he was thrown across the room by a giant, specifically Grop, Hagrid's half-brother, during the final battle. The man who came to execute Hagrid's hippogriff got taken out by Hagrid's family. That's not irony. That's poetry. Jugson. Jugson was a Death Eater captured at the Department of Mysteries. He gets one moment of notoriety in the battle. Lucius Malfoy shouts at him to stay in formation, which tells you everything about both men. He was sent to Azkaban and presumably escaped in the 1997 breakout. Jugson is the kind of Death Eater who exists to make the Ministry's failures feel even larger. One of many. Captured, escaped, absorbed back into the ranks like nothing happened. Knott Sr., father of Theodore Knott, Slytherin classmate of Draco Malfoy, was captured at the Department of Mysteries after being injured in the battle. He was sent to Azkaban and presumably escaped in the 1997 breakout. Theodore, his son, was later found in possession of a prototype time-turner and arrested. Apparently, the Knott family's relationship with Ministry law enforcement was not what you'd call positive. Criminal dynasties. Not just a Muggle phenomenon. Crabbe Sr., father of Vincent Crabbe, yet another Slytherin in Draco's year, was captured at the Department of Mysteries and sent to Azkaban. His son would later die at the Battle of Hogwarts, killed by his own fiend fire, a fire he cast himself and couldn't control. The Crabbes did not have a good war. Senior escaped in 1997. Junior didn't make it to 1998. Some legacies are not worth inheriting. Tier 5. The post-war and miscellaneous. The ones who came later, or sideways, or under circumstances that required the ministry to do some explaining. Stan Shunpike. Stan Shunpike, conductor of the night bus, appeared in Prisoner of Azkaban, deeply enthusiastic about celebrity gossip, was arrested in 1996 after allegedly boasting about knowing Death Eater's secrets at a pub. The ministry, under massive public pressure to show it was doing something about Voldemort, arrested Stan and threw him in Azkaban. He almost certainly knew nothing. Dumbledore said so explicitly. Harry said so repeatedly. The ministry didn't care. They needed to be seen to act. Stan was their press release. He was later broken out of Azkaban in 1997 and appeared among the Death Eaters during the chase of Harry, almost certainly under the Imperius Curse. If you want a single example of how the ministry's institutional failures enabled Voldemort, Stan Shunpike is your Exhibit A. Percival Dumbledore, Albus Dumbledore's father, sent to Azkaban in the late 1800s for savagely attacking 3 Muggle boys who had assaulted and traumatized his daughter Ariana. An attack so violent it left Ariana in a permanent psychological state of magical repression that would eventually contribute to her death. Percival never told anyone in court why he did it, because to explain his motive would be to reveal what had been done to Ariana, which he refused to do to protect her. He died in Azkaban, still silent, still protecting his daughter. Albus Dumbledore grew up with the world thinking his father was just a Muggle-hating criminal. The full truth didn't emerge for over a century. It is one of the quieter tragedies in a series full of loud ones. Dolores Umbridge, High Inquisitor of Hogwarts, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister, embodiment of institutional cruelty in a cardigan, was arrested after Voldemort's defeat and imprisoned in Azkaban for crimes against Muggleborns. During the Death Eater-controlled ministry, Umbridge ran the Muggleborn Registration Commission, a show trial operation that rounded up Muggle-born witches and wizards and sentenced them to Azkaban simply for stealing magic from purebloods. She sent people to their deaths with a smile on her face and a cat plate on her wall. The sentence she received was life imprisonment. She's perhaps the most important reminder in the entire series that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears pink. Have you ever actually thought about what Harry Potter's life would have looked like if literally anyone other than the Dursleys raised him? Dumbledore, Voldemort, the Weasleys, McGonagall? We broke down every single option. Click this video right here.